It afterwards publicly. Yeah, it seems like the recording started. So yeah, it's up to you if you want to have your camera on or off. Just so you know, we will share the recording afterwards. Okay, great. I see one more person is joining. Hello, welcome. We're just about to start now. Let's see, I'm just muting this new joiner. Exactly, it would be great if you stay muted unless when you want to say something. Okay, great. So, yep, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar series named Innovative Public Procurement in Action, Exploring Instruments for Urban Transformation. Today, we'll explore the instrument named Preliminary Market Consultations. My name is Sarah Nyberg, and I will be your host today. I'm a senior specialist in sustainable infrastructure and cities at the company South Pole. I'm a project manager from South Pole in the EU-funded project URBREATH, which is about implementing nature-based solutions in 9 European cities and beyond. More about URBREATH soon. In the project, we at South Pole focus on innovative financing and innovative approaches of procuring nature-based solutions, or NBS, as it's often abbreviated, in cities. One of our tasks is to build capacity about the different innovative procurement approaches. And that's why we have Francesco Molinari from the URBREATH Consortium with us today, who has a deep expertise in procurement. And I'll let him introduce himself in a bit. So the objective of this webinar is that you will learn about preliminary market consultations, and that we can discuss and have an exchange about it to learn from each other and how it can be applied. And the structure of the webinar is the following. We have first a circa 40 minutes technical deep dive by Francesco Molinari to understand the instrument. Then we'll have time for your questions and we'll make our best to respond to them. After that, we have an interactive part for around 25 minutes to discuss the pros, cons, and the relevance of the instrument for NBS procurement in cities. And then we'll finish with a summary, final remarks, and an outlook to the coming sessions. So, because as you might have seen, so this is the first set of 5 sessions, and in which each session will go through one procurement instrument. But before we dive into the instrument, I will give you a bit background and contexts. So if we start with a big picture, we know that climate change poses an urgent threat to us humans. We can see the devastating impacts of climate change today with wildfires, extreme heat, flooding, and droughts. Therefore, we need to take urgent action to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions as much and as fast as we can. In parallel, we need to increase Earth's capacity to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, for example, by planting more trees and other plants. Due to the negative impacts of climate change we experience today, and which for the coming years will become even worse, we also need to adapt to the changing climate. And this is where nature-based solutions come in. The plants both take up CO2 and they contribute to climate adaptation, for example, by reducing the risk of flooding, thanks to the ability of soil to hold water, and reducing the temperature locally by providing shade. Since more than 65% of the world's population will live in cities by 2050, and cities will emit over 75% of worldwide energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, it is important to focus on the implementation of NBS, nature-based solutions in cities, which URBREATH is doing. One necessary step to implement NBS is the procurement of the nature-based solution. Cities can follow their normal procurement procedures. However, innovative procurement approaches bring several benefits. They allow for the early stage engagement of relevant financing and implementation partners. Second, the innovative approaches allow for the co-creation of projects to reduce costs. highlight co-benefits, and add revenue generation. And third, they facilitate innovation and can bring forward creative solutions. And to improve the business case of urban NBS projects and to procure more innovative solutions like NBS, which are often innovative by nature, like green roofs and facades or urban wetland restoration. So therefore, we will go through 5 innovative approaches of procurement during the coming 5 weeks, so starting today. And we hope that you not only will learn about it and discuss them, but we encourage you to apply them in your context, since I see that many of you are really working in cities and representing cities. And yeah, for any new joiners, we are recording this session, so we will share it afterwards. So yeah, it's up to you if you want to have your camera on or not. But yeah, let's start with the first instrument, namely preliminary market consultations. So Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Now I'm going to share the screen. Please confirm that you see my screen. I will also do something before launch the presentation and then share it to avoid the usual issues that come up in these cases. So now you should be able to see my presentation. I see Sarah nodding. Thanks for the introduction, first of all, and thanks for joining this webinar, first of a series of 5, every Monday at the same time, which may be good or bad. Let's take it in the positive way. Activities around us haven't yet started, so we can spend 1 hour to do something out of the ordinary, which I expect to be, and I will try to make as interactive as possible. My name is Francesco Molinari. As Sarah said, I am part of the URBREATH project consortium. Personally, I am affiliated to 2 distinct partners, Politecnico di Milano and the Lisbon Council of this consortium, and I will also report about activities done in the context of another European funded project with the leadership of ANCI Toscana, the Association of Toscan Municipalities, which is also the region I am coming from. Another bit of coffee to wake ourselves up. We have 3 goals for today, as Sarah was anticipating. We will narrow the focus today on the preliminary market consultation, PMC instrument, making also examples which I hope can help us reflect constructively and interactively on the potential of this instrument for the specific sake of NBS procurement, which is the topic, among other things, of the URBREATH project itself. So in the presumably longer part compared to my introduction of today's webinar, what I would welcome is the participation of you guys, stimulated hopefully by my words and the examples I will be making, to contribute to something going more effectively and being more effective than a simple Q&A round. Let's start from the rationale of this initiative. As you can see in front of you, these are just some examples of what we name nature-based solutions. The variety and in some cases the complexity or the ambition of these examples is evident to our eyes. So if we start from this perception and consider, for example, that it's just an example, the binary front-runner follower city model, which is proposed by URBREATH, but not very innovative indeed. It's been for about 20 years that Horizon Europe, and before Horizon Europe, the previous framework programs of the European Union have funded projects in this domain based on the interplay between leaders and followers, front runners and followers, and so on. If you bear in mind the pictures I showed you before, the complexity and the variety of nature-based solutions, the topic of adaptation, the mission, I might say, if the word was not something ambiguous now for other reasons, the mission of adapting nature-based solutions that worked fine in a front-runner city and transfer them, replicate them into the follower cities. That mission, given the complexity, given the variety, is a problem which is tremendously hard to solve, at least in my opinion, as the conditions for local adaptation are obviously different and maybe profoundly different from case to case. For this reason, in the webinar cycle and more generally in the various activities proposed by the URBREATH project, we are reflecting on the topic of knowledge sharing, which you see in the top part of this slide, asking ourselves what is indeed replicable, and given the nature of the nature-based solutions we are trying to adapt or transfer, if the instrument of public procurement of innovation, which is actually a collection of instruments, 5 instruments, the first of which is presented today, can be helpful, and to which extent to achieve some of the goals that are considered priorities in the view of many European and national institutions. So let's start from the PMC and what it is about. My presentation will try to stay in between explaining an instrument which may be totally unknown to some of you, and trying to highlight the key aspects for those of you who are familiar with the instrument, and therefore, through my highlights, I hope to challenge you and ignite some reactions, even disagreements, on what the instrument can do. So in a nutshell, if we think of a preliminary market consultation, we should consider the 2 pictures on the left-hand side of this slide. A public event, this picture comes from Valencia, with people in a room watching presentations, and in some cases, also online or hybrid events with people connected remotely. The purpose of this PMC is, from the perspective of a public buyer, to establish constructive dialogues with market players before the initiation of a tender procedure, even without the obligation to finalize it, just for the sake of gathering intelligence of where the market stands, which solutions exist, which of them have already been tested, under which conditions, to formulate a vision which might then optionally be transferred into a call for tender. This event is therefore profoundly deregulated. The legal basis is an article of the current directive, European directive of 2014 on public procurement, and then the national legislations which have adopted the directive in the different member states. But basically, the so-called procedural instructions are very, very superficial, and there is a very huge, at least in my opinion, power and degree of freedom in the organizers to structure the events, including making them online or hybrid, in the best possible way, in the most useful way, under the only condition to respect the principles of transparency and equal treatment of all the economic operators, avoiding the risk of giving the impression that some of the contributions actually had a different kind of influence on the way the future call will be structured. So the stage of the ideal procurement cycle at which the PMCs position themselves is the stage of planning. Planning before tendering, planning before launching the call. So planning at the level of strategizing, I will show you examples, or planning at the level of formulating the specifications of a future call for tender. There is no obligation, like I said, to land into a call for tender. On the other side, it would be improper in a PMC environment to mention the specifications of the future call for tender in any detail. We should stay at the level of the needs, not the concrete specifications or draft specifications of a future tendering exercise. Why is this useful, and why is this useful specifically in the domain of MBS procurement? Bearing the picture of the different options of MBS in mind, it is obvious, at least to me, that making order in this disorder is something challenging, and therefore presentations of projects in the domain of MBS, like green roofs or river restorations or others, which are not shaped as standardized off-the-shelf solutions, but are indeed projects, they can become sources of inspiration and also challenge the initial ideas and needs from the public buyers in a way that makes their visions more realistic and achievable, including from a financial point of view. The second big advantage is that even in this domain, there is a risk of vendor lock-in, you know, the phenomenon according to which once you start contracting a provider, a service provider, or even the provider of goods, it becomes difficult to change afterwards because of the accumulation of connections, relationships, and so on. So even in the domain of nature-based solutions, it can be the case that looking outside of the narrow borders of our current environment may prove beneficial. And therefore, knowing what is happening in the research domain, in the innovation domain, in the market for some of the solutions which are more mature than others can help us avoid this risk, on which I would welcome your comments as protagonists of these activities, if you see this risk concretely or not in your own experience. The third connected advantage or collection of advantages has to do with the risk of overambitious specifications, which may lead to a failure in the future tenders. You know, there are many ways to measure the success of a tender. One includes the litigation rate, how many participants bring you to the court because they are unhappy with the results. That is a measure, but there is also another approach, which is based on how many bids, reasonable or potentially winning bids, you receive. Not today, but in the coming webinars, we will explore in detail the advantages provided by some instruments of public procurement for innovation to negotiate the specifications in some cases, or at least the features of the technical aspects of each bid during the process, instead of taking a single offer which looks like a take it or leave it opportunity, only to be evaluated against the price, the cost of that solution. By consulting the market early and before publishing the specifications, in this case, we can predict that to some extent there will be better adherence of the contents of your call for tender with the existing capacities of the economic operators, at least those that will have participated in your event. And finally, in many cases, and this would open up a bigger window which I don't have the time to explore, but it is very related to the objectives of the URBREATH project. Our definition of public procurement is far broader than the procurement cycle I showed you with the diagram in my previous slide. In fact, it includes structured and systematic engagement of stakeholders and even citizens in various steps that come before and after the strict public procurement process or cycle introduced before. In this case, we should acknowledge that the success of MBS projects often requires collaboration with several stakeholders, including local communities. So the potential advantage of PMCs, and I will show you examples, is to create a structured space for this dialogue and even co-design or co-creation to occur, which at least at the very minimum increases the creation of societal value in the community. So now let's go to the second part of the and final part of my presentation, which goes through the practicalities of this instrument. First of all, it is something dating back to 2004, although the directive of that time was not mentioning the PMC in a specific article, which happened 10 years later, and now in every legislation in your country, if it belongs to the European Union, at least you should recognize quite easily a dedicated article, which is a replica of this article here, as generic as it can be, where the building blocks are that this activity must occur before launching the procurement procedure. It has to be done with respect of the principles of non-discrimination and transparency, and it may involve experts, market players, with the main purpose of receiving advice on how to structure the future procurement procedure. Practically speaking, what has to be done is to choose, first of all, a format, which can be on-site, online, or hybrid. Identify your needs and your objectives in this event to be published in a formal invitation. Never disclose the content of your future call for tender is sound advice here. And then invite as many suppliers, experts, and users, not only from your territory, but more broadly, to participate in this event, allowing, this comes from my personal experience, this is positive in my view, written contributions, because people normally, we are all busy, they cannot attend, or they maybe not have sufficient time to get ready. So receiving written contributions and, of course, making them public on the website of the initiative together with the recording of the session, which is obligatory in light of the commitment to transparency, is a good addition to the process, always avoiding to give undue advantage to anyone and ensuring fairness at all times. One example, as I mentioned, from another European funded project, Climaboro, which is incidentally in the short list of 3 potential winners of the Innovation Procurement Instrument of the year 2025. We will know it in 8 days if we are the ones. You know, like in the Academy Awards, the winner is, someone will go there, not me, and cross his or her fingers waiting for the feedback. What we did was to have 8 events in 8 distinct locations, 1 online, 7 on site, and structured the whole approach according to the previous guidelines. So to stop for an instant again on the pros and cons and to summarize also the experience coming from that project, which has a follow-up, I don't have the time to explain in terms of concrete tendering procedure, we can say that from the implementation of PMCs, which is not as frequent as it should be, in my opinion, even within the context of public procurement for innovation projects, the advantages are that you might get better specifications and more realistic budgets for your solutions, encouraging innovation and diversification, and so reducing vendor lock-in, reducing the risks inherent with public procurement ending up into litigation or lack of a sufficient number of competitive bids, improving in general the competitive climate, especially for SMEs being holders of innovative solutions, building trust with suppliers, getting to know each other between suppliers and public buyers, without the need to end into a call for tender. The negative or risky things can be, of course, the need to allocate time and resources. In one of the experiences I will show you, it is explicitly said that we need a leader for this experience from within your buying institution. It's not something easy to situate because the linear or almost linear projection of procurement activities I showed you in the diagram, in fact, it is not so easy to apply in practice, because in practice what we have is several procurement cycles running in parallel, in sometimes interfering with each other, in sometimes in some cases becoming object of a prioritization from the point of view of the leadership of your institution, also due to financial constraints. So it's not easy to consider this addition to the process as linear or circular as it should be when the reality speaks in terms of ups and downs, stops and goes, and innumerable issues that can occur at any time. There is still a risk of involuntarily generating bias or unfair advantages to someone, despite the requirement of strict transparency, which is not always possible to maintain. For example, something we experienced is the tension between the need to ensure transparency and the will of some participants to protect the contents of their proposed ideas for alleged reasons of IPR protection, which is not always the case. We tried to connect this requirement with evidence that, for example, there is a patent application ongoing and therefore it cannot be made as public as it should be. But you know better than I that in every market, including in this market, in this industry, innovation is hardly patented. The approach, the most frequent approach is to try and stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of your competitors, and disclosure, even involuntarily, of contents may lead to some legal challenges if mismanaged. Paradoxically, being this a non-standard procedure, the different interpretations are so diverse that creating a single and unequivocal approach is quite hard, and in fact, it has never occurred so far. So let me really come to the end of this presentation now with some examples. I will touch very quickly. The examples are public. I took this information from published sources, and I will show 3 of them to highlight 3 different ways of using the preliminary market consultation instrument in relation with the MBS, which is the topic of our webinar and project. First example comes from the city, as you can see, the Polish city of Poznan, where the idea was to disseminate the territory, especially the most densely urbanized areas of the city, with very small places, parks, social gardens they are named, where people can have a bit of rest and also be inspired in more environmentally proactive behaviors. Here the use of an instrument like PMCs has been connected, and this is interesting for the purposes of URBREATH, with the search for sponsorships from the private sector, and also, therefore, with the goal of diversifying funding sources beyond the traditional city budgets. The second example comes from Malta. It is about a school with a big area, which you can see on the top picture, being the object of a transformative initiative. Here, the area is considered so sensitive that the participation, in this case, of the residents and the key stakeholders, including first and foremost the management of this secondary school, is considered vital to get the prior consensus on the interventions that are going to be made. We are in between the process of transformation. The report dates back to December last year. Finally, third example, a bit older than the other 2, it shows the potential of preliminary market consultations when done in a systematic and continuous way. One of the links you can see at the very bottom of the slides includes a list of maybe a dozen of distinct events which we can compare to a PMC, where specific investments, being part of a huge and ambitious plan of £45 million, as you can see, from the city of Glasgow, has been used as an instrument to get the specific approval from the communities affected by each single element of this program, which was globally about drainage systems, but with different techniques, methods, and approaches depending on the different areas where they were implemented. There is also, due to the time passed, there is also literature, as you can see on the right-hand side, describing the impacts and lessons learned. You can make reference to that literature following one of the links provided. I am done. I thank you for your attention, and as agreed with Sarah, I will now stop talking and pass the floor to her for the continuation of this webinar. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your presentation, Francesco. I think that all of us have learned something today. Before we go into the discussion, I would just like to open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions to Francesco on what he said, basically, if anything is unclear or if you just want something more explained. So yeah, I'll wait a few seconds and then just raise your hand using the hand raise function, or if you have your camera on, you can raise your physical hand. Or you can also write in the chat. So I'll wait a few moments to see if you have any questions to Francesco or on this topic. Or maybe everything was crystal clear. Maybe Francesco just explained it very well so that nothing is unclear. Yeah, I don't see anything at the moment. Of course, just raise any questions later, like during the discussions as well, if you have any. Yeah. Otherwise, does anyone just want to share any remarks or reflections based on the presentation by Francesco? Yeah, I see a first comment here from Kia. Thank you. That it was it's a commonly used instrument for you, and you're based in Mannheim in Germany, I see. Good to hear. It's clear. Yeah, we'll soon have yeah, if you want others like now or soon, if you want to share like how you have done it in your city. So yeah, we have it otherwise as part of the discussion, but if you already now want to share something on how it was in your city, how you used it, how it went, if you would do it again, would you do it differently, then we're open to hear it. Then you should be able to unmute yourself and just share it, Kia or someone else. Or if you have any other thoughts, comments, remarks on the presentation, something you just thought about and that you want to share. Of course, the floor is open to anyone who wants to speak. Otherwise, we'll go into the discussion with the questions that you see on the slide. I just want to give a moment first if anyone wants to just share something you have on your mind. I know it's Monday morning, so might not be on the top, but yeah, otherwise just go over to the actual like interactive part in the discussion. So about the pros and cons of PMC and the relevance of the instrument for end-based procurement in cities. So yeah, we would like to hear of you on which pros and cons you see, both in general and specifically for the application of NBS for procurement in cities. We're also curious to hear your thoughts and ideas regarding the possible use of PMC in your cities in general or for procuring NBS. And if you have any cases, yes, as I said before, to share from your cities where you have used the instrument, we invite you to share that as well. So yeah, does anyone want to share something on what I just mentioned? Otherwise, we can start with the pros and cons, perhaps, what you say as the first question on the slide. Or also, sorry, no, number 2 would be pros and cons. Sorry, otherwise we can start with number 1. So yeah, so if we look at the technicalities of the instrument, like what do you think the presentation was convincing? Do you agree or disagree with the main argument that PMCs can be very beneficial in the local adaptation of NBS through public procurement of innovation? So yeah, any thoughts on this? Do you agree? Yeah, so we have a contribution from Martina from Pilsen in Poland. I'll read it out loud. So they're currently undergoing the PPI, so Public Procurement of Innovation in Pilsen, within the Klimaborough project, which Francesco mentioned before. So they find it quite useful, and yet the most demanding part is the shift of the traditional mindset. So instead of focusing on the solution itself first, they need to focus on describing the core of the challenge first. And they're currently waiting for the tender results, but it seems very promising, especially in soft projects. Yeah, thank you for typing it, Martina. So yeah, good to hear. Seems promising. Okay, yeah, it's currently ongoing. But good to hear that it seems promising. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So we have another city there from Klimaborough, from the Klimaborough project. Cool. I see also that Jürgen has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. But it was more like a general feeling that I had. So, like, thank you very much for explaining this instrument. It looks very promising. But for me, it's still a little bit conceptual. It's like a conceptual approach, in my opinion. Well, you said it yourself also. Well, that there are diverse interpretations of how to organize it. So that there's not really a general approach, but the examples that you gave us, they were really very enlightening. So there, I really could see what you were saying. So my question is more like, can we find more examples at some place, or are they bundled? You gave 3 examples. Are there more of them?
Yes and no, in the sense that we lack structured collection dedicated to PMCs. And more generally, to anticipate something, we lack, in any case, collections that are that have the instrument in common, because normally what we have in the state of the art on the existing portals like OPLA, for example, it's a thematic organization of these instruments more than something that is focused on the diversities of the methodologies, if I can use this expression, the diversities and the commonalities. So it is easier to find groups of projects dealing with specific issues rather than groups of projects dealing with the same instrument with different nuances. This kind of structuration of the contents doesn't exist. On the other hand, I wonder if it is needed, in the sense that in many cases we are bound by the regulations, by the rules, to act in very specific ways. Not in this case. Once we have controlled for the obligations to be transparent, to be inclusive, not to discriminate, not to give preferential treatment to any economic operator against others. These are known as the general principles of procurement law, and they are all quite obvious. Every public sector organization, every civil servant knows very well what to do and how to abide by these general principles. Once we have controlled for them, there is full discretion in organizing the activities under this instrument, and also, as we will learn in the coming webinars, for the other instruments. Personally, I see this as an advantage rather than a disadvantage because it can be helpful to the newcomers to find their own ways to adopt the innovations. In this case, they are not even very new, as they date back to the beginning of this century, more or less. So the idea would be that instead of looking for collections of descriptions, which can also become outdated, and in any case need interpretations from experts, it would be more beneficial to go and ask for the advice of someone who has already tried this successfully. And I'm not suggesting something that doesn't exist on Earth. I think most people working, especially in public administration, they tend to form leagues. They know about other people working maybe in different bodies or agencies dealing with similar issues, and the exchanges, the peer-to-peer exchanges are frequent to learn from the examples and maybe do adjustments. So what is probably something we might want to invest more in is this kind of peer-to-peer learning, for which some organizations or voluntary networks of goodwill people already exist. I can mention the Urban Agenda Partnership, for example, which is basically a group of civil servants and policymakers working in entities at the national, regional, and municipal levels who are particularly keen on exchanging experiences in this domain. They have their own agenda of activities, and by the way, joining is totally free of charge. Every organization bears its own costs to go into places, but when the meetings are organized, the knowledge we can gain through this mechanism of peer-to-peer learning is really worth the trip and the cost of going there. I don't know if this answers to your question. Thanks, Jürgen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good to hear. Also see that Martina the comments are regarding the project in Pilsen on public procurement of innovation, where they need to shift from the traditional mindset to this more innovative thing, is that they're focusing on how to support sustainable mobility in children or school areas. And it's not only about technical solutions, but it also opens the door to solutions that they did not think about before. So yeah, that sounds like a positive thing, that you can really, be more innovative, think broader, think wider if you use these more innovative approaches, which has many benefits. Yeah, thanks for sharing again, Martina. Good. Any other thoughts or comments about the technicalities of the instruments? Or who's agrees or disagrees with that can be beneficial of NBS. Maybe some seconds, otherwise we can go to question number 2, which we see on the slide. So it's then about the potential pros and cons, or benefits and challenges of preliminary market consultation for the sake of NBS. So do you agree or disagree on the items on the list of pros and cons provided? And do you have perhaps any additional items of pros or cons to suggest? So Francesco, can you go back to the slide with the pros and cons so we can see them again? And then we hope to hear from you what do you think about the pros and cons, or the benefits and risks? And if you have any further ideas. Yeah, you can also take a moment to read through them again, of course. Yeah, I see the last point of the risks, like paradoxically being a non-standard procedure doesn't help. I think it's similar to what Martina wrote, that you need to shift the mindset, like you're used to doing things in a certain way. It's of course convenient, you know how it works. So you need to step outside of the comfort zone. You might need to convince colleagues in the municipality to do it in a different way. But then you can perhaps show the list of all the benefits, all the pros to your colleagues and say like, okay, it is possible and it has several benefits, so let's do it. And yeah, of course, we hope that you, if needed, if it helps you to use this instrument in the future. So yeah, open up the floor. Anyone who has any thoughts, comments, additions, questions about the pros and cons? Yeah, Jürgen?
Well, sorry, it's also more a general remark, but I think that, well, seeing the goals that you have with the PMC, that strict transparency, it's maybe even more a pro than a con, because well, it's helping you to reach your goal.
Yeah, regarding the fourth point there on the risks. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, the risk is not to be as transparent as you should be. That is the risk, because many processes occur in parallel and they are not always manageable. For example, just imagine the people who, this is a real experience, contact different members of the coordination team. I was mentioning before the need of a leader, but the leader should not be left alone. There should be people working with him, for him. Normally, there should be a single email address to which every request for information should be sent. But what if a participant very frequently uses the personal email address of a member of the coordination team to send a request or to share some information? Coordinating these efforts becomes an issue. Every exchange must be made known to the other participants to avoid the risk that someone may say, through that exchange, it was something that generated a separate decision that was then transferred into the call text and constituted a competitive advantage for the economic operators engaged. This is hypothetical, of course. It may be also a risk with different intensities depending on the countries and regions of Europe we are located in. But it is an example of the particular care that complying with the general principles of procurement law sometimes requires, even when it looks obvious, at least in principle, to respect, in this case, the obligation to transparency.
Yeah. Maybe I actually have a question. So if you go 2 slides back, like 2 slides to the left, you wrote that what you underline, you should never disclose the content of the future call for tender. So do I understand it correctly that like your recommendation is to, like you shouldn't, like disclose actually what you want to procure before, but you just say, it says like identify needs and objectives in the published invitation. So you can only write like something a bit in general, we want to do something on this, but not exactly what you want to procure. Yeah, I see you're nodding. So
yeah, that's exactly the point, because the disadvantages of doing this would be multiple. In particular, if you are too specific on what you want to do, you are already restricting the perimeter of your interactions. And this is not your interest in this very moment. Your interest is to know what's happening around, irrespective of a specific localization of your intervention. And this is something that already matters. Then, continuing along this line, if the topic is about drainage systems, why should you mention that, think of the Glasgow examples, you are interested in discussing the intervention to be done specifically in that urban area which has specific characteristics. Again, you are going to restrict instead of opening up the scope of this exercise, which is to know about the solutions that exist, those that are being developed, for example, in the context of European or locally funded research and innovation projects. If there are solutions already in the market, what is their price? Or if there are needs to do additional research or innovation to transform prototypes into products. That is also interesting for you to know, because your drainage system might magically become at the same time the place of experimentation. This is what is happening in the experience, for example, of the city of Pilsen, as Martina was mentioning. What the specific solutions will be about exceeds the technical aspects, because they are to some extent developed and finalized thanks to the time allowance and the resources of the public procurement initiative. So restricting is never a good idea. And finally, restricting might be used as an argument against you, that you were not actually wanting to know what's around you, but you were trying to assess the best value for money combination that could be in this moment, in this period of time, mobilized or gathered from the market without following all the rules and the procedures of a properly set up call for tender. So that would be the risk for you of a legal challenge in the end.
Yeah, yeah. So as I understand, yeah, it's just to keep it more open, to have more possibilities coming in, like not to close off any possibilities too early. Yeah, it reminds me of something like a challenge focused approach or something. So you don't decide to procure a specific solution, but you say, like, we have this challenge, what can help us solve this? So that in that way you're just like more open earlier. So that's why you don't are too specific in the beginning. So yeah, thank you. So if you want to go back to the discussion slide, we had prepared a third question for the discussion as well. So yeah, so we're happy to hear from you. So everyone in this webinar, even if you're from URBREATH or not, everyone is welcome. So if you have any personal experiences to share, are you more or less convinced of the usefulness and the viability of the PMC now than before the webinar started? So yeah, we heard from Kia in Mannheim. Unfortunately, she left now, but it's a commonly used instrument. Also heard from Martina, who mentioned like more public procurement of innovation in general, that they're using it. Do we have anyone else who has just heard about it or used it in their city, or know of another city which has used it? Yeah, we're really nice to hear, to just share, learn from each other, and then you can of course find out more after this webinar about the examples that Francesco shared, or what you're sharing now. So yeah, what personal experiences you have, or what have you heard about? Or just also, are you more convinced now? Are you curious to try it out? It would also be nice to hear if someone might want to consider to use it. Yeah, otherwise I know that it's not that common, so I understand if not too many cities have used it yet, and that's okay. But that's why we have this webinar, also to share information about it, to hopefully spread it, to use it more. This preliminary market consultation, yeah, it's also part of URBREATH knowledge sharing. Do a little bit more if someone thinks about it. No contributions. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, if not, then we might come to the end of this webinar. Francesco, do you want to say any more comments or final words before I sum it up?
Yes, just one quick thing. I left for the last slide this very short collection of online sources, of course, only in the English language. I would like to stress that every person from another non-English speaking country may find equivalent information locally. Anyway, this is just a very short list you can take benefit from, guidelines from the government of Ireland, from the Generalitat de Catalunya and the European Commission.
Yeah. Thank you. And we'll share the recording afterwards. In some way, we can share if not the slides, but we can share the links hopefully afterwards. So you can explore also to the examples which Francesca mentioned before. So then you can read more about those if you're curious, especially if you're thinking about using it in your city, to know more about how others have done it, to learn from them or even take contact with them. So yeah. Thank you for that. Then yeah, then I guess we'll wrap up. So yeah, what we learned today. So we learned about the preconditions, or we learned that preconditions for local adaptation in different cities, it differs, of course. So it's always different, and you need to adapt, like see how can you do PMC in your city. We also learned what preliminary market consultation is, and why it is beneficial for procurement, especially of NBS, but you can of course use it in other contexts as well. But basically what it is, you receive a device on how to do the procurement procedure, like in a very early stage. You get inputs from different stakeholders. You do it on-site, online, or hybrid. We also heard about the pros and cons. Yeah, and then we had a discussion, some sharing, where we heard that it's being used in different cities. So yeah, so this was the first webinar in a series of 5 webinars. So they will be on each coming Monday at 9 to 10:30 a.m. CEST. And so the following topics on the coming weeks will be the following. So next week we'll have the topic, or the instrument will be competitive dialogue. The one after that, on the 13th of October, it will be about competitive procedure with negotiation. After that, on the 20th of October, it will be about innovation partnership. And then the last one on the 27th of October will be about pre-commercial procurement. So I really hope you would like to join the coming webinars as well to learn about the other innovative approaches to procurement. And yeah, here. So the link with more information and to join the meeting is here. I'll share it in the chat. So especially if you're not from the consortium, you find more information there. And then you just click on the join link to join. Make sure to save it in your calendar yourself if you haven't already received the invitation, which you, if you're part of URBREATH, have received. And then we're also happy to connect and collaborate with you if you're not already in contact with us through the URBREATH Consortium. So I can share at least my email address in the chat. I know, Francesca, if you want to share your email address, if people want to reach out to you. So then, yeah, if you have any further questions, comments, or something, just let us know. We're happy to share. And yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, thanks, Francesco. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And yeah, have a good start of your week, and hopefully see you next Monday.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice. Yeah, Francesca, I don't know if you have, if you have some minutes, if we talk now a little bit, just for next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maximilian, do you have a comment?
We cannot hear you. Max, you're muted.
No, you're not muted, but your microphone doesn't seem to work. Okay, you write to us.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, and I guess I see the recording is still, I don't know if I can stop the recording.
You must have the
access, yeah, I'll write a chat message to Marina to stop the recording.
Okay. We can also go to another room if you prefer.
Yeah, we can go to another meeting so that this is not okay.
Comments.
Yeah. Let me just write. Where's Teams? Okay, I guess it will also stop if we both leave. So maybe, yeah, you and I, Francesco, I can send you a quick invitation to Google Meet or something.
Okay.
If that works for you. Yeah. Okay. See you in a minute or so.